Minister Lecce, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Good to be on.
This entire season is about origin stories, so I wanted to ask you about yours. Before becoming Minister of Energy and Mines, how did you view the mining industry, and has your perspective shifted since you started working in this new role?
Well, I think as a Canadian, we've really romanticized the imagery of Canada's North. Our identity is this frontiersmen and women who really were in the business of exploration. They were innovators, they were entrepreneurs. And I think that perspective of the core identity of Canada, the core industries that have helped build this nation strong, have frankly enhanced. It gives me great pride when I'm abroad and the world turns to Canada as a source of inspiration because we have the most ethically sourced resources on earth for human rights and the rule of law and labor standards, environmental protections. Indigenous rights are codified and lived out. So, look, I always had a good impression. Many of many immigrants that came to Canada, including Italians from my own family, many of them worked in the mines, worked in the north, helped to physically construct the country. So my impression was good. It's even better today, and it's because of the people at the heart of the mining sector.
I wanted to ask you a little bit more about this subject and a trip that you recently took to Washington, D.C., where you said the Americans are waking up to the reality that they are dependent on China for critical minerals and they need an alternative. Ontario is the answer. Why is it so important for Ontario that our trading partners work with like-minded democracies such as Canada?
When you think of nickel, cobalt, graphite, magnesium, the U.S. is very much reliant on Ontario when it comes to these key resources. But the truth is, the United States currently, for rare earths, is over 90% beholden to the Chinese government, the Chinese regime. And I think for any one of us who cares about democracy, I mean, I spent time in North Africa after the Arab Spring, in Tunisia twice, really after the fall of their dictator. And I will tell you, democracy is fragile. And for like-minded democratic nations, those that actually care about freedom and care about the rule of law, then they will lean in to working together to buy from and support each other instead of literally financing the very regimes that are weaponizing the resources for their own geopolitical ambitions. I think of Russia being the prime case study where natural gas has been weaponized against Europe, and yet they are beholden to that country for cheap natural gas. And so the catch-22, and here we are, even today, some nations still purchasing Vladimir Putin's natural gas. And so my message to American colleagues, I just had congressional leaders in Queen's Park just a few weeks ago, was the choice is binary for the world. Either they will intentionally buy democratic sourced, Canadian-made resources from their closest ally and number one customer by far, or they will continue to finance these, authoritarian regimes abroad. And when I put it that way to particularly Republicans, you get their attention because national security is energy security. So no matter where you lean on this, on the Democratic side, if you're moved by environmental protections or labor standards, or on the right based on, for example, national security imperatives, all roads lead back to Canada. And we want to keep hammering that message to our American friends. They can say they don't need us. I heard the president say this. I think objectively speaking, that the numbers bear fruit. I mean, the United States is 100% reliant on China on all these rare earths. And we have 12 of the 50 critical minerals they need in our backyard. So we're going to keep making the case that working together is in our national interest and it's the interest of our values.
Let's talk a little bit more about what is in our own backyard. As I mentioned, this is the fifth season of This Is Mining. We've been talking about critical minerals, of course, along the way. When we look at the provincial critical minerals strategy, it is really ambitious, wanting to make Ontario a true mining and clean energy superpower. What do you see as the greatest opportunities, as well as some of the challenges along the way?
Well, we're Canada's top mineral producer. Almost a quarter of the total production is happening in Ontario. We really are a key leader in that clean energy future that Canada wants to flex that muscle. I mean, we are a clean energy superpower today, I would submit, but it's really about embracing this good to great principle. I mean, we do a lot. We export a ton, But there's so much more potential left on the table if we don't move with a greater sense of ambition and speed. I'm a big believer in challenging the status quo because, look, our system today, currently, it takes about 15 years to open a mine in the province. We are one of the slowest permitting regimes on earth. And it begs the question, I'm not, and trust me, I'm not inspired by the likes of China or Russia that can move a lightning speed because they have no protections of any, for any labor or environmental. I'm looking to the Australias, the European Union, a comparable Western democracy in the case of Australia with indigenous protection. If they can do it in literally half the time, why is it that Ontario it takes 15 years on average? Why are we the second slowest, permitting regime on earth in the OECD? And so we've brought forth a bill designed to challenge that, to move at a greater sense of speed, and to really help achieve the public policy of self-reliance. And I hear politicians say it all the time, we need to be more self-reliant. Well, my goodness, if we care about the creating more jobs at home and decoupling our purchasing of Chinese batteries or Chinese owned mines in, be it in Africa or Indonesia and other parts of the world, then we will all be better off. And so I really do believe our energy strategy and our critical mineral strategy is really predicated on scale, moving faster, cutting the permitting timelines by half, and really reimagining how we can get to yes in partnership, because we just can't be the outlier. And look, I care about a cleaner, greener future for the next generation, but I also care about creating jobs today. And both of those imperatives are achieved if we in Canada and Ontario do our part to make us a prime destination for investment. And we're leading the world, leading the country in exploration, over $1 billion last year alone. But look, we have a lot more to go. The Ring of Fire, the largest, multi-commodity, over 7,000 square kilometers of land that has yet to be discovered. And so rare earths, critical minerals, it's all there. And so our government has initiated a new road building project. We're asking the feds to work with us to help speed it up and remove the duplication. So my point is, we do a lot, but we could be so much more. And that's why this vision of permit reduction is really critical to seizing the moment, to really punching above our weight and transforming ourselves into the energy superpower we ought to be.
What else do you think is needed in terms of accelerating some of these projects right here in Ontario, while obviously maximizing the benefits across government, northern communities, Indigenous partners as well?
Well, look, I think the first principle is we need logistics. We need to have access to move our ore. We are proposing, of course, building new roads into the Ring of Fire, being done in partnership with the First Nation communities who are leading the environmental assessment. We just announced a new road into Geraldton, which is a great achievement announced by the Minister of Indigenous Affairs. That's into the gateway of the Ring of Fire. We also need to move looking at other options like a port, which is why our government has a feasibility study to look at the viability of a port in the James Bay to move ore into, new markets, particularly into Europe. So we see a multi-phased approach, or a multi-pronged approach of roads and ports and pipelines and transmission corridors. We've got to get our country, in order to become that strongest economy, the G7 vision, we've got to unlock our own energy corridors amongst our country. And the truth is, today, if we look at energy, for example, it's easier to sell power north and south to the US than it is to each other as Canadians. And even our critical minerals, we could be much more collaborative on the extraction and processing of those minerals to keep them at home. So we've announced a critical minerals processing fund. To answer the question, one of the things missing was capital. We need to catalyze industry. And many of them said, look, we're ready to build, but we need a bit of support. So we launched a $500 million fund, which has been really important to really level up and support industry as they expand those value-added jobs in Canada. The final thing is just the importance of collaboration. We announced a $3 billion investment for Indigenous equity. We really believe it's one thing to consult. It's another thing to actually ensure they're in the driver's seat of ownership. I think that's an important social outcome. It's an important economic outcome. It's important for reconciliation. I mean, we can achieve all of those imperatives by working together at the front end. And that's why we've made that point. And we've seen a lot of critical mining projects come online quickly, when they do it right in partnership. So our message is, take the time, listen, collaborate, and then that's how we can unlock the resource potential of Canada. And obviously, we got to keep working with the federal government. We are different parties, but I think we share a common interest. We're on the same team, and we fight the same enemy, if you will, when it comes to the greatest geopolitical risk to our economy, which is from the U.S. and other adversarial regimes like China. But I think it's very important that Canadians really double down on buying Canadian and on investing in Canada and on making sure that the resources we procure are from Canadian workers, resources, or tech. And I'm a big believer in that, which is why the government's announced a plan to purchase local and to buy more Canadian product.
Another challenge that I think all of us face when it comes to mining is myths and misconceptions. Before I started hosting this series, I wasn't that familiar with mining, and I had a very outdated view on the mining industry in general. So in some ways, there's also sort of this information landscape where people don't really understand how mining works. What do you think about some of those myths and misconceptions that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is not mining of our grandfather's generation. I mean, this is a very mechanized, advanced, technologically advanced industry that's embracing AI and other cutting edge innovations. I mean, it is exciting, though, for me to help connect the dots because I think in Southern Ontario, to the extent that we perhaps in the GTHA and across the South may think about critical minerals as some far off thing. The truth is, my cell phone, my iPad, every piece of tech like that is in front of me right now, and you and the people watching, all of it was sourced from a mineral. The question is from where? And I would submit likely, based on just probability, it came from China. So we ought to be better at this. We ought to be smarter. We ought to embrace our values as a democratic force in the world. And thus, I think creating more knowledge and literacy amongst us in the South, how our manufacturing base, our economic base, is entirely dependent on minerals. And so that was a really important lesson for me because I didn't have that knowledge coming into this file. And I'm really proud, as I've learned about it, just how much of what we do in the South, our manufacturing economy, is not, and say wholly dependent, but it is strongly connected to access to minerals. And so I care about that. I care about the clean energy economy. We think about our battery expansion to harness power. Those are all coming from China today. So if we can get these resources out of the ground, we could do something good in the world. And I want to sell more into the US, sure, but I also want to make sure we've got our own access to critical minerals for our own national security. And Canada's very dependent on China. And that worries me in a world that's becoming very complex, and geopolitics is becoming, frankly, very fractured and binary. We've got to make sure we've got security of supply of everything from nuclear fuels to minerals to energy. We cannot be dependent on anyone. I mean, my goodness, America's a democracy, sure, but even during the pandemic, they denied us access to life-saving equipment. So we ought to, I think we've smartened up as Canadians. I think self-reliance is our priority for the Premier and the government, and I think this is the plan to do it. Cut down the red tape, reduce the permitting timelines, and work in partnership to do the big things that Canadians expect.
There is also a need to attract more people to the mining industry, especially young people. When you think about the next generation, what do you think is the most powerful case you would make to a young person who maybe has never considered mining as part of their future?
Well, first off, as I mentioned, this is not our grandpa's, grandfather's industry. This is really a cutting edge space with good paying jobs, unionized jobs. And in many cases, these are the jobs a young Canadian would want in the abstract: pensions, benefits, upward skill mobility, and dignity, because these are jobs you can own a home with and raise a family with. So, look, I'm a younger-ish person in public service. I mean, maybe not so much anymore, but when I started at the tender-old age of 31, 32, I sort of thought, look, who speaks for that generation within government? Who's the voice? And I think too many people of my vintage, our vintage, or particularly younger, they've lost that fire in their belly. They really have lost their why. And I don't blame them. I frankly blame government and society and the economy. It hasn't been working for young people. So we've got to give them a reason to fight on. And if we can create a good paying job in the communities they were raised in the North, in remote parts of Ontario, we can restore that promise for young people that through hard work they could achieve. They could live a good life. Like I think, if I may be so bold, like probably our parents' generation, where they're able to own a home and a middle class job was able to sustain their families. So I want to believe that's possible. Like I totally want to reject the premise that world order of the future is gone. It may be short term, but I think we can restore it. And so that's the key message for me, is inspiring young people to believe that they have access to some of the best jobs in energy, in nuclear, certainly in critical minerals, processing. Look at some of our companies up in Northern Ontario and Sudbury, across the province. They are doing fabulous work. And the level of participation of young people, of Indigenous communities, it's pretty neat. It's exciting. And it just shows that we are a progressive space where anyone with any skill can achieve. And I want that to be the rally cry of every mine, of every community, every hamlet and village in Northern Ontario, that, some hard work will pay off.
I would absolutely echo what you're saying. For me, I think one of the things that's really important when it comes to that next generation is that we know that they want to work at companies that are deploying AI, that are really tech savvy and tech forward. And a lot of people don't recognize that. I think in the mining industry, I had an experience to go to Sudbury and go to Glencore's Nickel Rim South and go underground into a mine. And I was absolutely blown away from that experience. I mean, it was unbelievably high tech and clean and safe and all those things I didn't really know about mining. That really left me with such a positive impression of the mining industry, but also excited like you are about the possibilities. When you think about moments or conversations that have left an impression on you, what are some of them?
I was in Sudbury this a few months ago, and we were in the bottom of this mine, we were very deep in this mine, and I've never been that deep, in a mine or in the earth before. So that was a bit of an experience, and a pretty cool experience actually, just as just as an individual, sort of seeing the raw beauty of the North. And I remember getting out, and we met a few workers, and many of them were one gentleman. He was an intergenerational worker. So his father was a miner, he's a miner, and great pride, great Canadian, beautiful story, family immigrants many generations ago. And I presented him with a Canadian flag, like in the heart of the mine, pitch black, just the only light is coming from these trucks. And it was really cool. Like it reaffirmed our why. This is what we're doing. Canadian workers, extracting Canadian resources, processed in Canadian, businesses, and then exported for our country and the world. That story, is a dose of patriotism. It's like, my goodness, this is what it's about. And to see them do it with a great sense of pride and professionalism, for me, was a cool and beautiful example that we got the best workers. And we've got something good happening in the North: social acceptability, collaboration, Indigenous engagement, employment. We're sort of on a roll here. And I think we found the secret sauce. So for me, it's a reflection that our mining industry, from exploration to extraction to processing, the full gambit, is among the most ethical, the most effective, and the most respected in the world. I mean, it's not surprising that TSX is the global center of mining capital. I mean, we've really built a reputation in Canada of being the best. So my experience, like yours, was frankly inspiring, because a lot has changed through technology, but some of the fundamentals still remain. And getting to meet families who've been in the game for generations, or young Canadians, or new Canadians, or Indigenous Canadians who've started maybe months or years ago, it just sort of affirmed to me that they are the gold standard on Earth, and we need more of them. I mean, the mining sector would want me to remind youngsters, or any parent out there watching, or educator, like we are estimating 20,000 additional skilled workers. And the baby boomers are leaving. You know this in every sector of the economy. We're feeling that pinch. So we need that next generation. And I hope that many families at home and communities, education, schools, et cetera, that they're going to really build that confidence. This is the job of the future. These are the cool, dynamic, good paying jobs that any youngster wants. And there's a lot to go around. We're talking tens of thousands of jobs today. And given our expansion of Mines, Amber, over the coming years, that means more people and more opportunities to follow. So it's a good story. We just need people to put their hand up and the realization that they will be picked for some of the best jobs in the country.
Absolutely. Minister Lecce, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.